Welcome to another edition of the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Gang. Today we're going to be talking about the safety room. It's the last room on the roster that I haven't covered yet. Quite honestly, this one's probably going to be a shorter episode because there's not a lot to talk about. This room is full of zero controversy. So let's go ahead and dive right into this thing. Let's start out by talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick's obviously the star on this secondary and one of the stars of your entire defense. He didn't get to play like it last year. Why do you think he had such a down year? It's quite simple. We used him in so many different ways, but he spent way too much time down in the box, and it limits his ability to make plays. He is a center fielder. He is tremendous at covering a lot of ground, reading the plays, and attacking the football when it's in the air. He wasn't allowed to do that because of the positions he was being put in. And so obviously he didn't have the interceptions that you would expect out of him. He didn't create the turnovers and forced fumbles that you would expect out of him. I mean, he had a pretty high tackle total. But you didn't sign Minkah Fitzpatrick to an extension to make tackles. You want him to be your playmaker on defense. It has been acknowledged by everybody in the organization that he was just put in the wrong positions. Was it out of necessity? Yeah, to some degree, yeah, it was out of necessity. We were just riddled by injuries at both the linebacker and the safety rooms. Now, he's versatile enough to do these things and play well in just about any position you put him in. He didn't have a bad season. He just didn't put up the numbers that are what we're accustomed to seeing out of him. So this entire offseason has been about getting him back to playing that center fielder role, as he called it, Minkah Ball. And I've talked at length about that. The signing of Patrick Queen and Deshaun Elliott, Cameron Sutton, as controversial as it was, the drafting of a guy like Peyton Wilson, the trade to get Dante Jackson here. Every move that they've made in the offseason can be directed right towards one thing and one thing only: getting Minkah Fitzpatrick back to being who he is and where he's most effective. We're trying to eliminate the need for him to come down into that box anymore. They'll still move him around, of course. You're going to try to disguise a little bit of what he's doing, right? You don't want to give tells on what he's supposed to be doing each play. And quite honestly, teams are going to know when he's in his position that he can be most effective. They're going to look for him on the field. Where is he at? Okay, what adjustments do I have to make as a quarterback knowing where he's lined up? He's the type of player that you have to be aware of where he's at on the field at all times. It's no secret that Minkah Fitzpatrick is one of the best safeties in the NFL. And on a defense full of playmakers, both up and coming and established, he's one of your top two guys on that defense. It's TJ Watt, and then it's Minkah Fitzpatrick. So why would you not want this guy to be in his best position to affect the game in a way that he's capable of doing? This defense is so much better when he's in the right positions. So yes, the team is trying to make him the center fielder again, the guy who terrorizes opposing quarterbacks, that make them watch for him on every play, watch his movements on the snap of the ball. And anytime you can draw a quarterback's eyes away from what's happening in front of them because they're worried about this guy jumping a route and creating an interception, that one split second can be the difference between a timing route working or being slightly off, creating either an incompletion, maybe it creates a turnover the other direction, maybe it's not even Minkah Fitzpatrick that gets the turnover. It's that one split second of a quarterback watching where Minkah Fitzpatrick moves to when they know he's getting to roam the field and they know he can cover a lot of ground. It's a very, very small detail that goes into the game planning, both offensively and defensively, that can really affect a game. And when you go against great quarterbacks, they're still going to make their plays, but they will know where 39 is on the field at all times. So Minkah's great. I mean, there's not enough. He's another guy. You can go on forever about what he does to affect a game, kind of like T.J. Watt. But we really needed a second guy next to him. Now, they thought they had a box safety in Keanu O'Neal last year. That obviously didn't work out. He was off the field a lot due to injury. When he was on the field, quite honestly, he wasn't effective anyway. So he didn't work out. Here comes Deshaun Elliott, who, quite frankly, he can play a lot of the same style in the same role as Terrell Edmunds. I thought he was an extremely undervalued signing. And right now, he's an extremely underappreciated signing from a lot of Steeler fans. He just doesn't get talked about very much. I saw people out there advocating to bring in Simmons. You know, they wanted another guy who's going to be another playmaker. The safety position is a devalued position. If you didn't have Minkah Fitzpatrick out there, you're not going to invest a lot of money in the safety room. He's just a special player, and you make exceptions for a guy like him, and that's why you pay him. But you don't need another superstar in the back end of this defense. You need a guy who's going to allow your current superstar to do what he does best. You need a guy who can do some of the dirty work. You need a guy who's willing to go in the box so that Minkah Fitzpatrick doesn't have to. But you also need a guy who can play in coverage. And I really think Elliott is a lot like Edmunds in the play style, only he's better at it. I know the contract doesn't necessarily suggest this, but I actually think the team's looking at him as if he does what he's supposed to this year, this could be a potential long-term running mate for Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this season. But if those two gel really well together, this could be something we're watching for a number of years to come. But Elliott is the exact type of guy you needed in the room with Minkah Fitzpatrick. We didn't need a superstar, folks. So those of you who are wanting the Simmons signing, the second Elliott was signed, that was out the door. And it wasn't necessary. You've invested enough money in your defense. You did not need to invest more money on the defense. We need to start putting some of the money back into the offense again. So I thought the Elliott signing was absolutely perfect. He's willing to do the dirty work. He's a good tackler. He wants to play physical. He likes to play in the box. He is the guy, especially in that 3 safety look. you're going to learn to appreciate him really quickly as a fan. I'm telling you, if you don't know who he is and you don't know what he's about, take a look at it. You're going to grow to like this guy. So who are the depth pieces, and do we feel very comfortable with the depth? Well, one depth piece is Damontae Kazee. Now, Kazee has been a pretty fine player. For us, he's not spectacular. He's not very athletic, quite frankly. He's slow, but he is a solid tackler. He seems to read the field pretty well. Can't cover a lot of ground, but he seems to make himself be available in the right positions. He's had some turnovers because of being in the right positions, but he's been hurt a number of times. And of course, last year he finished on a suspension. We can't have that in a room that, like last year, was decimated by injuries. Now, I think he was actually going for the ball when he hit Pittman in Indianapolis. To be honest with you, I don't think that was an intentional hit by any means. But the safety room is thin. You can't take chances where you're going to get suspended by too many personal foul penalties. I mean, come on. So, between his injury history and just a lack of awareness and creating personal foul penalties, getting himself suspended, and leaving us pulling dudes off the couch to come finish the season. Kazee can be a fine player, but you worry about his availability one way or another. Because once you've been suspended for personal foul penalties, the refs are going to be looking at you. And anything close, they're probably going to be pulling that laundry and tossing it in the air. You've got a reputation now, my guy. So I don't know. I mean, Kazee, I think he's a fine player. He's going to be your third safety on the field during those three safety packages. He's not going to be a starter this year. So I think as strictly a player, he's a decent player to be your backup. I think I was surprised they didn't cut him, quite frankly, and go find somebody else. But they also like to stick with the guys they know. Tomlin's very big on sticking with who you know. And like I said, in the games Kazee's played, he has played fine. He's not been overly great. He has created more turnovers than I expected out of him. He's very under athletic, but he's done fine. And that's okay for a backup. So it'll be interesting to see how often we use that three safety look, to see how many snaps he's actually getting, what percentage of snaps he's getting. I think we've made a lot of moves where that three safety look isn't going to be quite as necessary, I guess is maybe the best way I want to word that, as it was in years past, because of the athleticism of our linebackers now. So it'll be just interesting to see how that whole thing plays out and how it unfolds. Now, Miles Killebrew is your fourth safety. And, of course, we all know a lot about Miles Killebrew. He's been with the Steelers for a long time now. He is our special teams captain. He's our special teams ace. You really don't necessarily want to see him on the field in his safety role, but he's the fourth safety on the team. So there's not really a lot to cover with Miles Killebrew. He's not a guy who's going to be good in coverage. He's a good tackler. That's why he's made such a career out of special teams. But don't expect him to get any interceptions. Don't expect him to force any fumbles. When he's on the field, he's trying to hold his own. And that's as crystal clear as you can get with him. So there's not much to cover there. I think the intriguing thing that kind of popped up here over the weekend is the announcement that Ryan Watts, the rookie 6th-round pick, is seemingly moving to safety full time. Which brings up the question, is this team looking at carrying 5 safeties this year because of the injuries that we saw last year? Do they see something in Watts that suggests he could be a good safety? There's the story I saw, and I saw it from a couple different outlets, is that Elliott is going to be kind of mentoring Watts. Now, Watts is a bigger safety. He was a bigger corner when he was listed at that corner position. So I should say I said that wrong. I apologize. He's a bigger corner, but he's not a very big safety. I think he's about 206 pounds, 208 pounds. So from a safety standpoint, especially if he's going to play in the box, you might want to see him put on a little bit of weight. But he doesn't have far to go, and he's got a pretty nice frame. So you think he probably could put that on pretty easily. He runs pretty well. I personally don't have a whole lot of high hopes for Ryan Watt. I think he's more of like a special teams guy if he can find his niche in the NFL. I saw him at Ohio State. He came in. He kind of flip-flopped back and forth between safety and corner. Could never really figure out his position there. He transfers out of Ohio State, goes to Texas, of course. Plays pretty well there. He played as a corner, which surprised me because I thought he was going to be more of a safety. Now, Ohio State, I'll say this: they do use their safeties in a different role than a lot of teams do. They have what's called a bullet player there, and he's what I would consider more of like the box safety type position that we use here in Pittsburgh. They tried to put him in that position. He was younger then, so I'll preface this, but he did not play well. He was pretty quickly moved out of that position. So it's interesting to me that we're looking at him to play what I would consider the equivalent of that position in the NFL here with the Steelers. Now, again, with age comes experience, comes a little bit of wisdom, maybe some maturity, and he could develop into that guy. I mean, obviously, Ohio State identified him for that position for a reason. And it's interesting that now the Steelers are identifying him for that type of position. Typically, 6th-round picks aren't guys that you're going to look at that you expect a lot out of. They're fringe guys to make the roster. And that's kind of all I'm expecting from him this year is if he makes the roster, it's probably going to be special teams. It's not because he's magically turned into this great safety. But it's intriguing nonetheless. It's a storyline that we can watch as camp goes on. And, there's a number of storylines this year. But the biggest takeaway for me, the safety room is pretty well fixed. There's no controversy as to 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's set. The biggest thing for me and the biggest takeaway from this room is that we have Minkah Fitzpatrick in line to play the position that he is built for, and it's to be our playmaker again. So, again, this episode was going to be a short one. I hope you like and share. Leave some comments. I appreciate you watching and listening. Let's get into training camp. I cannot wait. Have a good one.